President Trump offered his condolences to the people of New Zealand, but when he was asked about the terror attack during an event at the Oval Office, the president added this.
You see today white nationalism as a rising threat around the world.
I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems. I guess if you look at what happened in New Zealand, perhaps that's a case. I don't know enough about it yet. They're just learning about the person and the people involved. But it's certainly a terrible thing, terrible thing.
All right, let's talk about it and bring in Republican strategist and former Assistant Chief of Staff of Communications for the former Georgia Governor, Nathan Deal, Brian Robinson, and former D.C. Democratic Party Chairman and Chair of the National Bar Association, PAC, A. Scott Bolden. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Brian, let me start with you. Best case here, right? Worst case is the president knows and he's just lying. Best case here is that he doesn't know what he's talking about because he's wrong. Why isn't the party, why party leaders calling him out on that?
About white nationalism? Look, if you look at what the comments that came out of the White House yesterday, they talked very specifically about attacks on Muslims. They talked very specifically about attacks on mosques. And the issue here isn't white nationalism, it's terrorism. It's not what these people think necessarily about their culture. It's about these acts of violence, and they spoke out very forcefully against them. And look, this is not something that happened in our country, and this is all being lumped in together as one thing. This guy came out and said he was a fascist. He was very specific in what he was. And the president even said there, look, I need to find out more. So he left that door open to look more into it, to see what's going on.
Although we would like for the president to find and get the facts before he speaks, he often does not do that. He consistently says that when the issue is white supremacy or white nationalism, though. But on the fact, though, on the fact of the rising threat of white nationalism, the president is just wrong. He said he was a law enforcement candidate. He wanted to be the law enforcement president. To enforce the law, you have to know the threat, do you not?
Well, certainly you have to know the threat, but please explain to me where he's been soft on white nationalist terrorism. And there was a strong law enforcement response when we had the rallies in Charlottesville. All of those folks who committed violence have been prosecuted to the fullest extent. I don't see him coming out and saying, hey, you know, let's pardon these guys. You know, what are you wanting to do? He's speaking out against violence, which is the underlying issue here. We need to stop the violence. We need to stop terrorism, and he's spoken out against it. I think you're reading way too much into this.
I think you're avoiding
wrong, right?
the real.
He's factually wrong. But Scott, go ahead.
I think you're reading well too much into the president. Whenever he's spoken out against violence in regard to white supremacists, he's always been forced to, and he's always had to read from it. I mean, this is the individual, the president, who wants to ban Muslims from this country and doesn't want any Muslims or Mexicans or black or brown people to immigrate to this country. And so when you talk about the white nationalism, that is the basis of the terrorism that we're experiencing not only in this country but now in New Zealand. That's the definition of terrorism. Someone who has a philosophy and wants to go to extremes in order to enforce that philosophy. Look at the manifesto of the killer in New Zealand. Look at the rhetoric. He names Trump, and you can match Trump's rhetoric about Muslims and people of color and this manifesto, and you see why the racists believe that our president is the racist. It's pretty simple, Brian, and you can say he wants to look into it, and you can say all these other things, right? But the facts are clear. When this Jewish synagogue in Pittsburgh we had that tragedy right there. He talked about anti-Semitism, but he could not bring himself to mourn and empathize with the Muslims who have suffered a tragedy and killed simply because of the color of their skin and the belief of their religion. That's fundamentally wrong, and this president needs to say a lot more about that.
Thank you, Scott. Look, it was your party.
Well, don't poo-poo it away. It's true.
It was your party.
It's humanity.
In the U.S. House
it's humanity.
It's
not politics. It's humanity, Brian. Humanity.
Scott, Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Look, it was the Democrats in the U.S. House, Scott, who refused to condemn anti-Semitism specifically. You know, you could say that President Trump is just following the lead of House Democrats by condemning hate more generally, condemning hate in all its forms, rather than specifying. I bet Nancy and Chuck would love it.
Well, I think they specified it in that
Let me get
resolution.
into this conversation. Let me get into this.
You didn't want to condemn racism. You just wanted to leave it to anti-Semitism.
Brian,
so you're for racism, but you don't want the Jews discriminated against.
Brian, let me ask you this. The president said during the campaign, Islam hates us. He's not retracted that, not pulled away. Do you have any evidence that he doesn't believe that anymore?
Look, I saw heads pop off in the media when he called for the ban on immigrants from certain countries. I saw heads pop off when he said that. And what happened? He went on to win an election. I think that this is a time of uncertainty globally. And look, that has resulted in a lot of hatred and nationalism of people of many colors and many different ethnicities. And it's going to be something that we have to approach on a global scale. Look at Brexit. The same thing's happening there. You're seeing this all over the world as cultures begin to mix. We need to have a serious, nuanced conversation about it, but we can't, because if anybody says anything beyond the politically correct talking points, you're called a racist. We can never have a serious conversation.
Wait a minute.
I got a news flash for you.
To say
our races and cultures have been mixing for 400 years in this country right here. So all of a sudden, mixing races and mixing cultures is a challenge or a problem? So you blame people of color.
Brian, hold on.
I'm not okay with violence, and I'm not okay with racism. This is the problem. This is the problem. You can't have a conversation.
Brian, hold on. Scott, go ahead. Your point.
Well, we've been mixing, and we've been a melting pot in this country. And the history of this country on the race question has always been tortured, with white America either enslaving black people, discriminating against black people, and then wanting to walk away from it because we've made significant strides. We still have a problem with race in this country. We did a national dialogue on race similar to what we had on reconciliation in South Africa. And black people and white people, or people of color, are just not comfortable having that discussion.
Right.
And so the cost of that are these mass killings and this growing white nationalism.
That is the cost of it. We're not having a serious conversation about it.
When you say, Brian, that we've got to have a serious conversation about it,
drives that narrative.
When you say we've got to have a serious conversation about it, we also have to address the President of the United States having said Islam hates us.
Exactly.
Wanting to have a complete shutdown on non-American Muslims coming into the country. There has to be some moment at which we reconcile that with now his ability to lead policy-making decisions. And just to say it's a little more than political correctness, is that a serious conversation? We got to wrap it here. Brian Robinson, Scott Bolden, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Christy.
Thank you.
All right.